Welcome, everybody, back into another edition of Prime Sports World, and a very happy Friday from everybody here at Prime Sports World. Thank you very much for joining us here as we are looking to break down the Washington Commanders coming off. Let me take a look at what the record was last season. I'm running this solo right now. Obviously, I'm David On Point Huffman. Thank you very much for checking us out. I should be joined here by Israel Vera and Mr. TJ Hopkins here momentarily as we break down the Washington Commanders, who finished last in the NFC East with a record of 8-8-1. Actually not a respectable record there as they played one of the most difficult divisions in football, as every single team outside of them made the playoffs last year, including the New York Football Giants, who made it as a wild card team. So a very tough division to make the playoffs in. And a lot of turmoil in the offseason, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of conversations being had when it comes to the Washington Commanders, as there's a new regime in town when it comes to the Washington Commanders, a new ownership. Daniel Snyder, no longer the owner of this football team. The new ownership group now has taken over. But yeah, let us know down in the comment section what you think about the Washington Commanders. Please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast as we get into breaking down the Washington Commanders as we start to break down their season and their offseason. We'll talk about a little bit as them as a team. Oops, I forgot to upgrade that graphic. So let's talk about the quarterback position when it comes to the Washington Commanders. This job is firmly in the hands of Sam Howell, who played one game last season. He threw for 196 yards. He threw one touchdown. He threw one interception. Apparently, Washington Commanders saw enough out of him in that one particular game to give him the reins to the franchise in 2023, 2024. Sam Howell is an interesting case. When he was in North Carolina, he was one of the conversations about being a Heisman finalist. That season really didn't go well for Sam Howell. He ended up slipping in the draft. He ends up falling to the 5th round. But the talent's there. The arm strength is there. The real question is if Sam Howell is going to be, what are expectations for him going into this season? What are you expecting numbers are you expecting him to put up? He does benefit by the fact that he has a really good number wide receiver one, and he also has a really good running game behind Brian Robinson Jr., Antonio Gibson. You have Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson had a solid rookie season, nothing spectacular or great. Curtis Samuel's always been a really solid wide receiver coming over from the Carolina Panthers last season in free agency. Byron Pringle spent one season in the Bear. He's basically a non-factor when it comes to the wide receiver position. Damani Brown is, another wide receiver who's on this roster. Logan Thomas, if he can ever stay healthy, is a really good tight end. The verdict is out if he can still stay healthy for an entire season. I'm not totally sold that that's going to be the case. This offensive line is an interesting conversation. They got Andrew Wiley in the free agency. They got Sam Cosmi in the draft last year out of Texas. Good right guard. I thought he was drafted as a tackle, but they're playing him at right guard. Like Nick Gates also came over from the New York Football Giants to play up the center position. Left tackle, kind of a mess with Charles Leno Jr. Believe former Chicago Bear was not good in Chicago, and that's why he's no longer in Chicago. A team that had a terrible offensive line didn't even want Charles Leno on their roster. But Sam Howell, talking about Sam Howell, he has the intangibles to be a really good quarterback in the NFL. The question is if he can put it together. Also, his birthday's coming up, so shout out to him. Happy early birthday to Mr. Sam Howell. We're talking about numbers. I'm not sure if this is the guy I would have hooked all of my confidence in when it comes to me being the Washington Commanders. He had one decent game and wasn't even all that good. 11 of 19 and 500, one touchdown and one interception. He had that long touchdown. He took 3 sacks in that game. That's more about the offensive line than it is on him. But talking about numbers, talking about Sam Howell, if you can get 2,500 yards out of him, if you can get, double-digit touchdowns, you can keep the interceptions under double digits, I think that's a pretty successful season for Sam Howell. I just not sure how good this offensive line is going to be in front of him. Andrew Wiley, coming off of the Super Bowl for the Kansas City Chiefs, but this is not the Kansas City Chiefs. And we've seen is the team players leave the Kansas City Chiefs and they don't have the same level of success. Byron Pringle, another example, a guy who was on the Kansas City Chiefs, was not as successful as the Chicago Bears. I am slightly concerned about being the only quarterback really on the roster right now. I know they hold Jacoby Brissett, and he's kind of been the old, whenever you need a backup, what is going to get Jacoby Brissett. So he's a stable hand there behind Sam Howell. But I mean, as a coaching staff that's probably coaching for their job here, right? I don't know how much longer. Hold on. I don't know how much longer Riverboat Ron is going to be the head coach of this football team. This team hasn't been all that good with him at the helm. I know they stood by him when he was battling cancer, but if I was somebody who quote unquote had their job on the line, I'm not sure I would put the reins into Sam Howell's hands. But they've made that decision. They decided not to draft a young guy. They're banking on the fact that they're going to probably be terrible this season and have a very good draft pick this year. Swinging in from there, let's talk about this defense. This defense was fantastic in 2022. Gave up the third least amount of yards in the NFL this upcoming season. I still have to do that. Sorry, I got distracted by something on Facebook. My apologies. But yeah, the third best defense in terms of yards allowed in the NFL last season. That isn't always a barometer for how good your defense is. Oh, man, come on, internet. When it comes to points allowed, they're in the top 10, allowing only 20.2 points per game in 17 games played. Yeah, this is a defense that was really good with maybe not the best secondary in the world last season, but this front seven of this Washington Commanders team, Chase Young, another year removed from an ACL tear, should be able to just work on his game this year and not have to quote unquote rehab. Daron Payne is one of the best tackles in the game. Jonathan Allen as well. Montez Sweat will get pressure under the quarterback. David Mayo, Cody Barton, Jamon Davis, all solid football players. Their front seven is as good as it gets in the National Football League, and bar none, one of the best units in the league. The question I still have, as I've had over the last few seasons, is what we're going to see out of this secondary. Kendall Fuller has been just okay at the cornerback position for the Washington Commanders. I know they took a swing on Williams III. The kid who started his season started in Cincinnati. He didn't even survive the entire season there before they ended up trading him away. But 3 picks out of Kendall Fuller last year. He's now 28 years old. He was drafted by the Commanders. He's been there the whole time. He's a solid quarterback one. Emmanuel Ford is the guy they just drafted. Not really sure what you're going to get out of him. And then at the safety position, Cameron Curl, Derrick Forrest. I can't pretend to know I know everything about either of these two guys. But the secondary is somewhere where I would be concerned. Cameron Curl, 58 solo tackles last year, no fumbles, no interceptions. And then on the other side, Derrick Forrest had 4 picks. One of the leaders in the NFL, actually, as he was a 2021 fifth-round pick, has really, shined into a pretty solid football player. 9 pass deflections, 56 solo tackles. That's pretty good production out of your safety position in the NFL, regardless of where you are, what team you are. But yeah, I think this defense, and we're talking about, I do think they're going to stay right in the top 10 somewhere in there. I just think this front seven is going to be too good and too elite to let this team slip anywhere further than that. It'll be interesting to see what they end up looking like when it comes to this defense. But yeah, I have a good feeling that this defense is going to be pretty solid when it comes to the nitty gritty, and they could probably make up for one of is going to be a very big offensive woes. I mean, that's basically what they did last season. I mean, this is one of the least prolific offenses in the NFL last year, and they had a 500 record last year, despite the fact that their offense wasn't all that good this season. So I'm also going to share the StreamYard link. So if anybody wants to join me and talk about the Washington Commanders, so I don't have to do this show on my own, I would greatly appreciate it. That link has now been shared into all of the places that we go live, including Facebook, YouTube, and the Twitch. So if you want to talk Washington Commanders football, this is the place to do it. Moving on to the final topic on the final storyline in 2023. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. This is not talking about anything on the gridiron. This is coming to the sale of the franchise. So Dan Snyder has finally agreed to sell this team. That finally went approved basically 14 days ago or 15 days ago, because there's 31 days in July. This happened on July 20th. So Dan Snyder has agreed to sell the Washington Commanders to the Joe Harris Group, for a $6.05 billion. Daniel Snyder has just been a black eye on the NFL, at least for the last 5 years, if not longer. pretty much since he's taken over the reins of the Washington Commanders. Scandal after scandal after scandal, sexual harassment allegations, decades of losing, public pressure to change the team name and logo after he refused when many teams had a problem with the quote-unquote racist architect of the Washington Redskins. This is a guy led by the Walmart hair. It was more than what the Denver Broncos went for, as he bought, man, talk about making a good business acquisition. Though the Snyder bought the team in 1999 for $800 million. He swung that around and got made $605 billion. So Daniel Snyder is winning. That's part of the rhetoric here, right? So as much as we don't like Daniel Snyder as a human being, very smart businessman, that's for sure. But let's talk about he also is going to face a $600 million fine. This has to complete with workplace misconduct. Daniel Snyder tried so many things to try to get over on the NFL. I mean, he leaked the John Gruden emails, think that would be something that the NFL would appreciate on his part. And he was just a toxic situation for the entire league, really. And I think the league will be a better place with Daniel Snyder not in it. I'm sorry if you're a Washington Commanders fan and you're a big Daniel Snyder fan. I just think he's bad for the NFL. I think he's bad for the league. And I think it's a good idea that the NFL decided to move off of him, and he's no longer going to be part of this. Josh Harris is part minority owner of the Philadelphia 76ers and the New Jersey Devils. So this is a guy who has a good track record of being a solid owner in a major sport. Magic Johnson is also going to be part of this ownership group. While Daniel Snyder owned the Washington Commanders, they made the team playoffs 6 times. They won 2 playoff games. They won 3 Super Bowls in the 80s and 90s, and they would never sniff that kind of success again with Daniel Snyder as the owner/GM of this football team. It just never worked out. And he brought in some free agent signings that never made any sense. Albert Hainsworth, I remember he brought Deion Sanders in, way overpaid him. I think the NFL is going to be a much better place now that Daniel Snyder is no longer in the NFL. And I think that the Washington Commanders can finally move away from what's been an off the field distraction constantly, with your owner constantly being in these releases and talking. I mean, that has to weigh on you as a person that plays for that franchise. What's my owner going to do next? We'll see what it actually means for Washington. And Josh Harris seems like a guy who has some money. So he'll probably, spend it on this team, spend it on this roster. So we will see. Let me know down in the comment section. What do you think that the Washington Commanders are going to look like with Daniel Snyder no longer in the mix there in Washington? Moving on. Let's talk about their draft. So first overall pick, or first pick in the first round, they took Emmanuel Forbes, the cornerback out of Mississippi State. They took Jarvis Martin, the safety out of Illinois, to address that defense as well. They took a Ricky Stormberg, center out of Arkansas, Braden Daniels, the offensive lineman out of Utah, KJ Henry, edge out of Clemson, Chris Rodriguez Jr., running back out of Kentucky, Andre Jones, edge out of Louisiana. I think when the conversation really starts and begins with the Emmanuel Forbes pick, I think, this is a team that really needed an offensive lineman, they needed a tackle. Unfortunately for them, there was a run on wide receivers and tackles. I mean, wide receivers and tackles, or not wide receivers, but just tackles in this draft. 4 of them, I think, were taken before the Commanders were able to pick. They do need cornerback depth. I just have a question about what the guy they ended up taking with this pick. I would have probably, I know he's returned 6 touchdowns for, he's also picked up 14 passes in his college career. So he also had 6 touchdowns as a defender, which is a pretty good number, for a guy who plays strictly on defense. But I think, with Christian Gonzalez still being on the board, that they could have taken a pick earlier. They got picked 1 minute pick later by the New England Patriots. I just think there were better corners on the board than Emmanuel Forbes. I just do. Do I think he's still going to be a probably pretty good football player? Yeah, he's got all the intangibles. He's got the speed. And the Commanders only had 9 interceptions last season. The best way to address that is to address it through the draft. And, restocking, they take defensive back out of Illinois. So they probably might cut veteran Kettle Fuller, as I talked about I talked about a little bit in the last segment. They would save a bunch of money if they saved him. So, I mean, this is probably a Commanders team where you're looking at the long term. I mean, you're probably not going to be competitive this season. So you want to cut losses on some people that can save you some money. And, if you draft a guy who has a potent amount of upside, this guy can work out. He's a defensive back. He can play safety or corner. He did both of those in college. So, yeah, you take 2 corners in the first 2 rounds. You take a center guard, Ricky Stroneberg out of Arkansas, comes out of SEC, played in, I know they signed Nick Gates. We'll talk about him just in a minute. But yeah, he played in the SEC. I mean, you're going up against the top competition. So we'll see. I mean, he could potentially be a day one starter potentially, as they have a starting job at left guard that's up for grabs, that he could potentially start in that position. He plays center or guard. And then to continue taking depth picks, you stick there swinging offensive lineman. Braden Daniels is another guy who comes from Utah, comes in a Pac-12. He's 249 pounds. He's probably going to need to add some weight if he wants to play center or guard. But he's another guy. He's the guy who gives you depth to the offensive lineman, something you need. And then the KJ Henry, defensive end out of Clemson. He's another guy who gives you depth at the defensive end position. You can never take too many of those guys. And with Chase Young's future also kind of a bit uncertain as you decline to pick up his 5th-year option. Montez Sweat also, they're both in their last year of the contract as you recline to pick up either their 5th-year option. He could become a situational pass rusher, if not a future starter in the future. And then the running back out of Kentucky probably may or may not play. They already have pretty good running backs there in Washington with Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson. This is probably a special teamer when it's all said and done. Welcome into the show, TJ. How are you, buddy?
Sorry, I'm late. Had some ripping and running to do, but I'm good.
It's all good. If we're just talking about the Commanders draft, real quick, I just want to get your take on one storyline before we move on back into the draft.
Okay.
Actually, we're just going to swing right into free agency. It's this last one. What does the ownership change mean for the franchise? I went on a whole thing about how I think that this means everything for the Washington Commanders. And we usually try to keep these storyline shows like more on the football field, but I don't necessarily think you can ignore what the toxic nature that Daniel Snyder brought to this franchise. And I know this is something that you wanted to talk about, so I want to swing back into it and kind of go from there, and then we can swing into free agency.
Yeah, cool. You can't ignore the stuff that Dan Snyder was allowed to get away with for the better part of 20 years, maybe more.
25 years. I mean, you bought the team in 1999.
25. Yeah, it's everything. It's what the fans have been asking for, and I think fans finally have a true appreciation of what it takes for an owner to get ousted in any particular sports league. Like, you look back at the Clippers with
Daniel Snyder or
Donald Sterling.
Thank you.
Right, like you,
or
like you
the,
see
the
how
guy the guy who was the owner of the Suns.
Yeah, like you see what it takes. Like, and I applaud the NBA on the second part with the Phoenix Suns owner, because they were like, "Hey, yo, we're not doing this again," and they immediately, boom, you're gone. So the NFL was kind of slow with this one because, again, this is 25 years worth of complaints, worth of buildup, worth of, like, it's not like this was a one-time thing with Snyder. Like, there were multiple years and multiple complaints about him, about the work environment he created, and the NFL did nothing. Like, the other owners did nothing. I'm like, when they had those owners meetings, is this one of, like, like when we go to a meeting, it's like, all right, first order, next, any other business. Like, that's where that fell under. Like the any other business, like, and if anybody brought it up, then they maybe touched on, they probably, hey, stop that, and then that was it. But I don't see this going forward with, obviously, the face of the ownership group is Magic Johnson. He has a minority stake in it. His group is in it, but he's the face. He's not the majority owner. He's just the face. Everybody needs that one face
Yeah,
to
the majority owner
associate
is
with.
Josh Harris. He's currently the owner of the Devils and the Sixers. Majority
So
owner of
yeah,
those
Magic
teams.
Johnson's the face, and obviously with new ownership means complete overhaul. Like they have to redo this thing from the top down. They got the top part right. They got new ownership. Next is maybe a new GM. I don't know. Maybe a new coach. I don't know. I like Riverboat Ron, but
I mean, they
you
haven't
already know, like,
even with all the distractions. I know they've stood by him with the cancer stuff and all his when he was going through treatment, but like he hasn't been remotely all that good in Washington. Like I think this is his swan song. I think like, and I think swinging back into Sam Howell. I mean, we had one game where he was like remotely decent. You're like, oh yeah, this is the guy. Like I think that they don't expect to be good this season, and they're like, you know what, we're gonna stink this year. We're gonna have a top 5 pick, and we're gonna clean house, including GM, head coach.
yeah, and obviously, I think the bigger thing in Washington, what they really, I think they care more about the name of the team than the product on the field.
I don't necessarily disagree with that take. So, but yeah, moving on from there, let's talk
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, you got.
because
That's all. Okay.
moving on from there because I was not just on Andre Jones, but I don't think he's even going to make the roster. He's an edge out of Louisiana. But moving on to free agency, they did actually do some solid stuff in free agency. Andrew Wiley coming over from the Kansas City Chiefs was their right tackle last few seasons as they won 2 Super Bowls with part of the team. Nick Gates, part of a resurgent offensive line there in the New York Football Giants. Trenton Scott, linebacker. Jacoby Brissett, old reliable Jacoby Brissett, coming in to be the
All
backup
reliable.
quarterback, probably the starter at some point this season. And then the key departures, Taylor, give me a 6-pack of Heineke. Cole Holcomb, linebacker, ends up with the Pittsburgh. Carson Wentz, still unsigned. And Wes Schweitzer was a guard who is now currently playing for the New York Football Giants. Or Jets, sorry, Jets. And Trenton Scott was a guard. I apologize. He's a guard, not a linebacker. But when it comes to and getting Andrew Wiley, a guy who comes in a culture of winning, I think getting those guys on a team that hasn't won a lot, I think that could be a big difference maker for a franchise. And Jacoby Brissett, it just seems like a really good locker room guy, and I think he's going to be one of those guys that's really productive. Like he might not play or be productive, but he's just a guy you want in your locker room. He just seems like he's going to be a player's player. Like he just goes about his business and handles it the way he should.
Yeah, Jacoby Brissett is he's kind of like he's the captain you want on your ship if the sea is storming. Like just keep things afloat. Like, and if it's one thing he knows, it's toxic workplace environments. He did spend the season with the Colts and Jim Irsay.
More than just the one season with the Colts. I think it was a few seasons.
Was it a few seasons?
I mean, I know he took over for Andrew Luck, but I think he was there longer than that. But he also went to Miami, and he was also in Cleveland.
Right, and he was in Cleveland last season with going through that thing with Deshaun Watson, and
yeah.
I guess you can deem that quote unquote toxic, even though it was the player, not the team.
3 seasons. He played 3 seasons in Indianapolis.
3 seasons with the Colts.
Yeah.
All right, so you there for 3 years, and so if it's one thing it's toxic work environment. And Jim Irsay, if he ain't careful, he probably gonna be the next one out if quiet is kept. I'm maybe right.
His tweets right now are just. I don't know if you watched that video I sent you about to be in the intern for Jim Irsay. It is real funny. It's from Tom Grossi. He's a Packer YouTuber, but that video is very funny. If you get a chance to rewatch it, it's a hoot.
Hey man, so yeah, I would not be surprised at all if a story comes out of camp leading up to week 1 that Jacoby Brissett is announced the starter.
Me either. For sure, me either. I would literally not shock. It wouldn't be shocked at all because we saw one game of Sam Howell, and I haven't heard much.
One game, right? One
game. He was 11 of 19 for 169 yards, a touchdown, and a pick.
He looked good against Dallas, right? It was and that was kind of
nothing game for the Cowboys.
but that was also the writing on the wall for the Cowboys because it's like you let this one guy come in on your first start and on his first start,
I mean, the Cowboys
and
weren't.
he
I think
looked.
the Cowboys were benching a lot of their players, but yeah,
Nah,
they got
not
beat
really.
26-6.
Nah, Dak,
But
not Dak played, and like it doesn't matter. But at the same time, like you're a Dallas team, like your backups are supposed to be better than their starters. Like that's literally how that's supposed to
swinging
go.
back into the Washington Commanders conversation, I like
I
the Andrew Wiley,
think,
free agent signing. I also really like bringing back
yeah.
De'Aaron Payne, not letting him go anywhere else, like being able to
Oh yeah,
tag him
Deron Payne, yeah.
and then sign him to a long term deal. Yeah, offensive lineman. Yeah, I think they did a pretty solid job when it comes to talking about addressing some offensive line woes. Because yeah, this was one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL last year. Like,
Yeah,
say,
Bears fans were not happy with the Deron Payne tagging because it's like the minute they were allowed to do it, they did it because
yeah,
like
but
because like
he
that was
was
one
never
of the names.
Washington was never letting him out of there. Like,
We
I
don't
mean,
know
yeah,
that. We don't know that. Like we had like they waited till
they
it
tagged him
was
like,
no like they tagged him almost immediately, but like the way things were shaping up, it's almost like they were gonna let him test free agency, and
yeah,
it's like
I do agree on that. Agree with you on that. But I think when it comes to free agency, I think they did a pretty solid job. Andrew Wiley, Nick Gates kind of carries this class. Losing, losing. I think losing Taylor Heineke is kind of tough, but good luck to him in Atlanta. It's probably like a B- job when it comes to free agency for the
I
Washington
mean, he go
Commanders.
like Taylor Heineke probably like it's to me for him that's a lateral movement. I think he
It's an
goes
upgrade.
to is it?
Yeah, going playing in Atlanta the next season, Atlanta's going to be better. Also, out of the unfortunate Jeffrey Okuda injury this afternoon, which
Yeah, that's
wishing him
another
all the
guy that
best.
can't catch another guy that can't catch a break.
Yeah, I mean Achilles, ACL, and now he gets injured in like the first day of practice. I hate to see it. But yeah, moving on from there. Yeah, I think moving from Washington to Atlanta, at least for this season, yeah, I think that's an upgrade. Not close.
Mm,
Uh, Swinging into, let's talk about their record. Let's take a look at their schedule. TJ, just looking at their schedule and just giving it a once over. What do you think their record's going to be when it's all said and done?
okay, they win week one. That's a given.
Okay,
Um,
I'll give you that one.
so we're off to a great start.
And then it goes quickly downhill
Then
from there.
it goes quickly downhill. I legit see a scenario where they lose their next 4 games
I see a scenario where they lose their next 17 games or 16 games. Like
in a
I just
row.
look at yeah, I don't like they beat Arizona because they're both going to be terrible. But I look at the rest of their schedule, man. I'm just not sure who they beat. I mean, maybe they could beat the Bears. That game's
No,
in FedEx Field in Landover, Maryland. But I think the
that's
Bears are going
also
to be. I think the Bears are going to be better than people think. I think they're an 8 or 9 win
oh,
team.
absolutely.
I think the Bears can win that game. They go to Atlanta, they go to New York, they lose both those games. They lose to Philadelphia, they go to New England, they lose. They go to Seattle and lose. The Giants come
Come
there, they lose.
on, they
They
don't
lose.
come on. They can beat New England. Come on,
I mean,
they
maybe,
can beat
but
New.
I mean, in New England, in Foxborough, with the unknowns about Sam Howell, I'm telling you right now, they're going 1-16 this
One
season.
thing, no, oh
The
no,
only
but
game, the only
the
game they're
one thing,
winning is
no, no,
against
no,
Arizona.
the one thing that is known is that defensive front. Like,
Yeah,
do
I
you
talked
really
about that too. I
expect?
mean, they were a top 10 unit when it comes to points allowed. They were a top 5 unit in terms of yards allowed last season.
Do you really expect Mac Jones to like with that front that he's going to be facing against? Again, this is Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen,
Well,
Montez Sweat, and
okay.
Chase Young.
They win that game. You convinced me. They're 2-16. I
They
mean,
could win that game.
what are we talking
They
about?
they could win that. They can beat Atlanta.
No, they
They can
can't.
beat Atlanta. Yes, they can. They can
No,
beat
they can't.
Atlanta.
You're not convincing me. They're beating Atlanta in
They
Atlanta.
can. Well, you're dying on that hill that is Atlanta.
I,
So
I
yeah.
sure am.
Um.
I,
Somehow, some way they gonna split with the Giants. I don't know how. Somehow, some way they gonna split with the Cowboys again. I don't know how, but it's gonna happen because it always happens. They don't have a chance in hell against the Eagles, in
no,
my opinion.
no, I don't.
Like
All
every
right,
like
they split with the Giants. I'll give you that. All right, they're 3-14. I'm not giving you the
um
Cowboys. I'm not giving you the Cowboys. I'm not giving you the Eagles because we agree with that. They have no chance in hell of beating the Philadelphia Eagles this season. They're not beating the Bears. They don't beat
they're not the
like
Bears. I don't know. to a situation with the Dolphins. I don't know by this point in the season, right? This
I
late in the
mean,
season.
I mean, let's pretend all hands are on deck. Let's not
Oh,
bullshit.
okay. All hands on deck. Yeah, Miami's killing them. The Rams. Full,
I think they win
full.
that. I think that, like, outside of how tough the offensive line is there in the Los Angeles Rams, we'll get to them eventually, maybe next week at some point. Uh, Somehow they were the worst team in the NFC South West last season because their season basically fell apart. And they didn't address any of their really needs in the offseason. There's potential that this could be one of those Ram teams that just straight up
Full.
stinks. Um,
The,
but I
I,
still think the Rams, as fully
I,
loaded, I think they
I
can
give him.
beat.
I give him 5 wins, bro. I give him 5 and 12. Five. All right. 5 and 12. Atlanta. That one.
I'm
Right.
looking
No,
at
not.
that.
I mean, not. I'm sorry. Not. Arizona. That's one. Right. Uh. Full.
They could beat Buffalo.
They can. Come on, really.
I'm just kidding, dude. Come on.
Arizona. You know what? I'm gonna give them Atlanta. That's two. They can beat Atlanta. That's three. That's two.
That's cute.
New England. That's three. I'm gonna give them the Giants game in DC. That's four. And okay, I
That's a
take it.
wrap.
I'm up. I'm upgrade. I'm gonna give them six. I'm gonna give them the
6.
Dallas. Yeah, I'm gonna give them the Dallas game in DC, and I'm gonna give them the Rams game. So they 6 and 11. Yeah, I got them at 6 and 11.
I'm going. They're beating New York in Maryland, and then they're beating the Cardinals obviously in week 1. And I think I will bend and say they will beat New England in Foxborough, because I just don't know what that offense is going to look like with Mac Jones at the quarterback of two of the majors. But they're either way, they're not going to be remotely good. So if you're a Washington Commanders fan, it might be a very long season for you and your fan base. Probably a season you guys need to have to really reset this roster and to reset this franchise, because you're really not going anywhere as currently constructed. You have a bunch of players that have expiring deals that you're going to have to make decisions on, including Chase Young, who he basically declined his 5th-year option for who knows why. This is a team that needs to clear house. They need to clear the GM. They need to clear the head coach. You need a franchise quarterback too. So I think you need a season where you reset everything. You reset your books. You reset everything on your roster. This is a team that's 5 to 6 wins is probably the ceiling for this team. The most you can win is 5 or 6 games. I can see this team being a 1-win team for real.
I mean, unless they unless they just flat out come out and announce it that we in the Caleb Williams, Drake May sweepstakes. Like if they just like come out and announce that like by week, if it's clear by like by that Atlanta game. So what's that? Week 1, 2, 3, 4. By week 6. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, if by week 6, if they 0-6, let's just in whatever by some miracle Arizona beats them. If they 0-6, yeah, that's them saying, yeah, we in the Caleb we in the Caleb Williams Drake May sweepstakes.
100%. We'll see what ends up happening with the Washington Commanders. I don't believe in this franchise right now. I just don't think they're going to be good this season. But yeah, thank you very much for checking us out. Let us know in the comment section what do you think the Washington Commanders are going to be like this season. I'm David Huffman right there. Is my co-host, Mr. TJ Hopkins. And a real quick note before we get up out of here: buy a lottery ticket tonight. Even if you don't normally buy one, just buy one. It's $3. You can have an opportunity to win $1.25 billion. What other, like, just roll the dice. Like, I'm going to leave right now when I go get my dinner. I'm going to buy a lottery ticket. I got nothing to lose. So that's just a quick note here from Prime Sports World. Buy a lottery ticket. It's a lot of money. I don't usually buy a lottery ticket until it gets over $1 billion, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to roll the dice. I mean, I'm going to piss away $3 doing something stupid anyway, so I might as well do it for a chance to win a bunch of money, right? Yeah.
That was part of the ripping and running I was doing. Like my mom's had me go buy her one, and to your point, like I never do it because I just think the whole thing is like I've said this before. I just think the whole lottery in itself is a scam because it's like how do you not like I understand like it is but it isn't because the amount of possibilities to get the winning numbers is just that like it's Like
I mean,
it's insane to think it's rigged.
you have a better chance of getting attacked by a brown bear and a polar bear on the same day than win the lottery.
Than winning lottery, and that's why that's why that shit makes me think it's rigged. Why? Because I am never going to be in the same place that a brown bear or a polar bear is. So
You don't know what your life's going to be. It's going to lead up to, TJ. Don't rule anything
like,
out.
unless I find a job in Alaska where both happen to be.
Maybe you're at the zoo and they both break out of they both break out and you're just like, you know. Anyways, this is going on way too long, but yeah, buy a lottery ticket. You got nothing to lose. I'm David Huppin, right there, the co-host of TJ Hopkins. Please like, share, subscribe to the podcast. We're gonna be winging into the Giants on Monday, so keep an eye for that show. I've been David Huppin. TJ, what are we doing at the prom, my friend?
We bring the heat, kind sir.
Yes, we do, and we go get dinner. I don't know what we're gonna get, but I am starving. So I'll see you
Can't
later,
go wrong
buddy.
with Chipotle.
Oh, I actually hate Chipotle, but that's a whole new thing.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, dude, it's a whole thing.